Coming up on 5 Minute News. Millions to get student debt relief in Biden announcement. 2 militia members guilty of Gretchen Whitmer kidnap plot. And Moderna seeks FDA approval for Omicron variant vaccines. It's Wednesday, August 24. I'm Anthony Davis. President Joe Biden today will announce his long-delayed move to forgive up to $10,000 in federal student loans for many Americans and extend a pause on payments to January. Biden has faced pressure from fellow Democrats to provide a broader relief to hard-hit borrowers, and from moderates and Republicans questioning the fairness of any widespread forgiveness. The delay in Biden's decision has only heightened the anticipation for what his own aides acknowledge represents a political no-win situation. Biden's plan will likely include an income gap limiting the forgiveness to only those earning less than $125,000 a year. The plan would eliminate student debt entirely for millions of Americans and wipe away at least half for millions more. The nation's federal student debt now tops $1.6 trillion after ballooning for years. More than 43 million Americans have federal student debt, with almost a third owing less than $10,000 and more than half owing less than $20,000, according to the latest federal data. The continuation of the pandemic-era payment freeze comes just days before millions of Americans were set to find out when their next student loan bills will be due. This is the closest the administration has come to hitting the end of the payment freeze extension, with the current pause set to end on August 31st. A jury on Tuesday convicted 2 men accused of conspiring to trigger a second American Revolution by kidnapping Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, handing the U.S. government a victory in its second attempt to prosecute the case. The verdict against 39-year-old Adam Fox and 46-year-old Barry Croft Jr. comes about 4 months after a federal judge in Grand Rapids, Michigan, declared a mistrial in the same case. 2 other defendants were found not guilty in the first trial. The pair, who the government said were members of the 3 Percenters militia group, were also found guilty of conspiring to use a weapon of mass destruction, an explosive device that prosecutors say was intended to hinder law enforcement's response to the planned kidnapping. Croft was found guilty of an additional charge of possession of an explosive device. The men face the possibility of life in prison. A sentencing date has yet to be announced. The plot was aimed at forcing an end to the Democratic governor's mandates to stop the spread of coronavirus in the early days of the pandemic. By kidnapping the governor and putting her on trial, they said, the men hoped to push the country into open conflict as a contentious presidential election approached in November 2020. After the verdicts, Whitmer, who is up for re-election in November, warned about the dangers of radicalized domestic terrorism. Meanwhile, a former Louisville detective pleaded guilty in federal court on Tuesday for helping falsify a search warrant that led to the killing of Breonna Taylor, a black woman whose death fueled a wave of protests over police violence against people of color. Kelly Goodlett pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy, becoming the first officer to be held criminally responsible for the botched raid. Goodlett was accused of conspiring with another detective to falsify the warrant that led to the raid and covering up the falsification. Moderna on Tuesday sought U.S. authorization for its COVID-19 booster shot, tailored against the BA4 and BA5 subvariants of Omicron, and said if cleared it would be ready to deliver those doses in September. Its application with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration is based on preclinical data for the so-called bivalent dose that contains the dominant BA4 and BA5 variants, along with the original coronavirus strain. Moderna said a mid to late stage trial for the vaccine is underway. The submission also includes clinical trial data for its BA1 Omicron targeting bivalent booster candidate, which was last week cleared in Britain. Moderna's announcement comes a day after rival Pfizer and German partner BioNTech sought US authorization for their vaccine booster, retooled to target the BA4 and BA5 subvariants of Omicron. Pfizer's application is for emergency use among 12 years and older, while Moderna has sought authorization for use among people aged 18 and above. Pfizer said the doses would be ready to be shipped immediately after the regulatory clearance. Moderna too has been ramping up the production of the BA4 and BA5 targeting vaccine to be ready for delivery next month. Countries including the United States, Britain and EU members have been preparing for vaccination campaigns in the fall season to protect against future surges. The FDA had in June asked vaccine makers to tailor shots to target the two dominant subvariants and said it would not require studies testing the shots in humans for authorization, similar to how annual changes to flu vaccines are handled. You can subscribe to 5 Minute News on YouTube with your preferred podcast app. Ask your smart speaker or enable 5 Minute News as your Amazon Alexa flash briefing skill. Subscribe, rate and review online at 5minute.news. 5 Minute News is an Evergreen podcast covering politics, inequality, health and climate, delivering independent, unbiased and essential world news daily.